Doctor Who spin-off. Aboard the TARDIS, the slight hum of the center console filled the room as the Doctor, amidst a jumble of cords and circuits, examined a large crystal about the size of a fist. With a magnifying glass in one hand, he slowly brought it closer to the pink diamond he held in the other. "Well, Doctor?" Perry asked with a stammer. She usually knew better to ask him questions in the mood he was in, but seeing as they had been stuck in the space-time continuum, as he had explained earlier, for hours now, even her patience was running thin. Perry?" the Doctor said absent-mindedly, never taking his eyes from the crystal. The young American girl was still wearing her swimsuit from earlier in the day in preparation for the lost pools of Andalar, a target they had overshot 4 times already, though. "Is it broken?" she ventured. "Broken? Broken!" the Doctor barked. "Why, Perry, it's absolutely shattered," the Time Lord said, tossing the pink rock away behind him. "Well, do you have another one?" Perry asked in a hushed manner. "Another one?" the Doctors repeated almost mockingly. "Another one, Perry?" Varden crystals, I'll have you know, are one of the rarest crystalline structures of rock in the universe, only found on one planet during 1 year of every million. The girl almost looked hurt at his rebuttal. Seeing the effect his words were having on his loyal companion, he added a bit more softly, "No, Perry Gilliam," which was Perry's real name. "No, I do not." "So does that mean we're stuck?" she asked, looking down at her bare feet in sorrow. "Stuck, Perry. As you know, we're still moving through the time vortex. Just without the crystal to focus the TARDIS space systems, we're unable to leave the vortex's time diameter. We could leave the space vortex, sure, but we'd be leaving it at every time conceivable. The consequences would be disastrous," he said, throwing his hands into the air. "So we're stuck," Perry said, grimly resting her head on her hands from her seat near the console. "I've put out a distress signal," he said matter-of-factly. "As much as I can't stand them interfering, the Time Lords will come too." He was interrupted as the center console began to rise and fall of its own accord. "We're moving again!" Perry exclaimed. The Doctor, mouthing the word moving, gave her a disapproving look. "That's impossible," he went to say before the console came to a satisfying rest. "We landed!" Perry said cheerfully, her worries abated. "That's impossible, though," the Time Lord said, clearly astonished. Now it was Perry's turn to give him an irritated look. "You just said that, Doctor." "But Perry, we've landed!" he practically yelled. "I know, Doctor," Perry said meekly. "But Perry, there is nowhere to land. Look! Look!" he said, swinging the display screen around for her to see. The young woman wasn't even going to pretend to understand what she was looking at. "It just looks like a bunch of waving, moving lines," she said, exasperated. "Exactly!" exclaimed the Doctor. "Wherever we are, Perry, this place exists outside of space and time. A separate dimension, even." "Well, it looks pretty normal to me," Perry said, staring at the screens showing the outside. They appeared to be in a huge waiting room, similar to an airport. The room was vast and white, with seats throughout. And ahead on the screen there were people in line waiting to be seen. "What?" practically screamed the Doctor, hitting the lever that opened the doors. The Doctor quickly grabbed his coat and rushed outside. "Wait for me!" yelled Perry, grabbing her towel without thinking and following him. Reception! The TARDIS had materialized in the center of the room, and to Perry's surprise, no one seemed to have given it a second look. She found the Doctor examining the ground right outside. "Linoleum tile," he was saying under his breath. She looked ahead and saw that most of the people in line had one weapon or another, either about their person, and looking around, the room was impossibly vast. "Doctor! Doctor!" Yes," said the Doctor, looking to see what had grasped his young friend's attention. "I can't even see the end of the room," she gasped. Each line that was filled was about 10 feet apart and seemed to end at a desk or booth, each filled with a young woman either busy helping someone, shuffling through papers, or sometimes handing the person something. 2 people a few lines down picked whatever it was off the counter. The woman handing the man next to her whatever it was, both then smiled and then disappeared completely. A small bell dinged, and the woman at the head of the line they were closest to happily called, "Next!" "What in Rassilon's name?" the doctor muttered before the air in front of them began to shimmer and a young man seemed to materialize out of thin air. The young man had short brown hair pushed up in the front. He was tall, about 6'1", and of medium build. He wore a white jacket with white pants, both which clung tightly to his body, and on his side was a sword with a black hilt adorned with green spirals. "Of course," the doctor said knowingly. "Of course. Vache Valor, I should have known." The young man turned around and seemed not to recognize the doctor at first. However, his eyes drifted over the TARDIS and then seemed to widen in recognition. "Doctor?" The man practically jumped. "Doctor, is that you?" he said, laughing now. "It is, isn't it? Look at you, I love the coat, man." Yes, the doctor said, gripping the lapels of his coat. "We haven't met in this regeneration yet, have we?" "No, we haven't, my man." "The last time I saw you, we played cricket on Libido 4. You've got a mean swing, Doctor," Vashi said, bubbling with joy. "I take it this," the doctor said, motioning around with his arms, "is reception then." "Ah," Vash said, smiling weakly. "You don't miss a beat, huh? Perry, I'd like you to meet Mr. Vash Valor, windrifter and fellow adventurer. Vash and I, on several occasions, have crossed paths and put an end to everything from Cybermen to power-hungry ghosts and genius mechanical hackers. And of all the many people I've met who share my hobby of wanderlust, his methods are perhaps the closest to acceptable in my terms." Vash's smile faltered a little as the doctor's introduction ended. However, his childish grin returned as he met Perry's eyes. Holding his hand out, he said, "Vash Valor, windrifter and fellow explorer, a pleasure to meet you, Perry. Glad to meet at least someone who seemed normal for a change, at least as far as the friends of the doctors go." Shook the man's hand. "It's nice to meet you as well." "Going swimming?" Vash asked mischievously while taking in her outfit. Rolling her eyes, Perry explained, "No, the doctor was supposed to be taking us to some place called Andalore to go swimming, but once again we seem to have gotten lost." "Lost, Perry? Lost? I'll have you know, Perry, I've been meaning to check up on this place you call reception," he said, his eyes meeting Vash's as he did. "In my opinion, we are exactly where we need to be." He seemed satisfied even. "Next!" the girl at the counter called over the ringing bell. Moving forward in line, the doctor then asked Vash about his travels. "So you finally found the man you were chasing then," he said with a harumph. "I'm sure you two resorted to bashing each other over the head then as usual." Frowning slightly, Vash looked at him sideways. "No doctor, actually. He ended up being a friend after all. Well, one under duress, that is, but—" A little sad, the rifter looked away. "I couldn't save him. I hated him up until the end, and then lost him all over again." The doctor's eyes betrayed the wisdom one finds with age. "I'm sorry, Vash," he said softly, "for your loss and the many others you've suffered at Omega." Looking up from his brief moment of sorrow, the light returned to the young man's face. "I did find Casca, though. Or at least her whereabouts, that is." "You know, Vash," the doctor said, eyeing the counter they were slowly approaching. "I've done some researching myself into your little group. The Assembly of Rifters goes back a long way. Unbelievably long, actually. Longer than most civilizations last, plus some." "Oh, really?" Vash said, eyeing the doctor suspiciously. "Your face may have changed, Doc, but I know that look." "We shall have to see," the doctor said, smiling again. "But for now, I'm much more interested in what's going on here." Vash stared questioningly. "Are you aware that we're currently outside of reality as we know it?" "Of course," Vash said agreeingly. "Everyone knows that," he even added with a smile. "Our powers don't work here, and time seems to move differently, What's your point? My point? The doctor seemed to grumble something to himself. My point, my young friend, is that this place is ludicrous in itself. A separate reality I'd understand, and would even try to close down the bridge from here to there. But this, the man said, really emphasizing the this. This is a pocket dimension, a sort of bubble attached to ours that simply should not be. On the rare occasion they do form in our universe, they only exist for fractions of a second, maybe even a couple at most. This one should have burnt itself out ages ago. But here we stand, and according to you, you've been coming here for years. You know, Doctor, I've missed you, Vasher said, grinning. The bell chimed again. Both the men looked over together, just in time to see the pair in front of them disappear like the rest. Next, called April. Good, it's our turn, the doctor said, striding forward towards the desk. Both Vash and Perry exchanged smiles and followed their dear friend forward. Yes, hello, April, the doctor said, reading the young woman's name tag, squinting his eyes. Well, hello, Doctor, the girl replied cheerfully. She gave Vash a small wink, then returned her gaze to the doctor. We've been expecting you. Expecting me? The doctor yelped. I was in the middle of fixing my TARDIS when suddenly someone, the doctor, looked around. Someone muddled with my navigational controls and brought us here. Perry snorted loudly. You weren't doing a very good job, Doctor, the young American girl laughed. Ignoring his companion, he continued. It's next to impossible to hijack my controls, the doctor said quite seriously. Let alone the power needed to sustain this place must be exponential. I'll speak to your supervisor, young laddie. April, having stopped paying attention halfway through, was busy collecting something from under her desk. Madam, I shall repeat myself. I must insist on you. The doctor was cut short as April placed a large pink, what looked like pinkish diamond, one being the biggest Vash had ever seen on the counter. 1 Varden crystal, she said briskly with another smile. Ahem, well, that's very good and all, the doctor continued. However, young lady, these crystals have to be meticulously cut and fitted to the precise control lattice, especially in the earlier TARDIS models, she finished for him. For once, the doctor seemed flabbergasted. And, she said, bringing another small metal contraption to the table, 1 module frequency phaser controller to help stabilize the new crystal output and also usable to stabilize the ship's steering. The doctor's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. Why, with this, the man said almost ecstatically, I can finally rid myself of the ever-so-annoying feedback I get when landing. The timeline scooped the materials from the counter and rushed back into his TARDIS without another word. Wait, Doctor! Oh no! Perry said, distraught, looking from Vash to April, then back to the TARDIS. Wait, Doctor! She yelled, helplessly following. Does this mean we finally get to go swimming? Her voice died off as she disappeared into the TARDIS. Vash turned to April right as she dinged the bell and cried cheerfully, Next! She stood up and peered behind Vash before grinning mischievously and then turned around and disappeared through the door behind her. Well, that's never happened, Vash said slowly to himself, scratching his head. Oh well, he smiled. Off to the TARDIS then. Yes, he said happily under his breath as he made his way to his all-time favorite mode of transportation. Perry found the doctor standing at the TARDIS control panel, pushing buttons and flipping switches in a hurry. Are we really leaving, Doctor? Giving her one of disapproving looks, he jammed another lever down quite forcefully. Of course we're not leaving, the doctor chided almost mockingly. Oh, the young girl said, idly flipping a switch out of her own accord. Brushing past her, flipping the switch back into its position, he continued, No, Perry, I think not. Well, what are you doing then? She said, hands going to hit another button before being batted away by the doctor. I'm doing what I should have done when we arrived, pulling the screen around so he could see. I'm checking for any signs of advanced technology as well as Atron radiation. That will tell us if anyone's been messing around with time travel. And there we go, he finished with a final push of a lever. Oh dear. What now? Perry asked, her hands now on the towel hanging from her neck. Nothing. What? There's nothing, he exclaimed, cutting her off. Other than a few trace particles left over from the TARDISers. Nothing. Not even so much as an iPhone signal. Nothing. What's an iPhone? The young woman asked, rolling her eyes. Before he could answer, Vash Valor walked into the room. The TARDIS, the young man said with a sigh of relief. Yes, hello, Vash. Welcome back indeed, the doctor said with a touch of irritation. Did you perchance happen to ask? Before he could continue, the center column began to rise and fall. The screeching noise that followed every landing and takeoff began to sound. Perry! The doctor yelled. What did you do? Nothing! The girl yelled, fiercely holding onto the console as the room began to shake. Vash fell sideways into one of the railings, laughing as the doctor frantically tried to regain control of his ship. I just wanted to go swimming! Perry practically cried as she held on for dear life. Doctor, stop it! She yelled. I'm trying, he said. Pulling himself around to see the screen, he took a look, before smiling to himself. I see, he said, pulling himself back around to the other side. He pressed one single button, and the room instantly settled. What did you do? Perry asked in relief. I simply turned off the brakes, the doctor said with a smile, patting her on the head as he did. She gave him a slightly dirty look. Someone, he said quite loudly, eyeing the room as he did, as if he had an audience. Someone has taken the liberty of programming coordinates into my TARDIS and has landed us some 2 million years in your future, young lady. Are we on Earth? She asked, breathlessly. Oh, let me see. We're about 2,333 light years away from Earth. Just a hop and a skip away in spatial terms. Patting the console with his hands affectionately, he continued. However, seeing as I've yet to reinstall this Dunmuir crystal, courtesy of your friends, the doctor said, looking towards Vash, who once again laughed only just now, finally having straightened himself from his embrace with the railing. I wouldn't really call her my friend, he stated. More like my boss's secretary. He shrugged his shoulders. This takes genius to do, the doctor retorted quite seriously. Time Lord technology is not just basic mathematics, Vash. His tone taking on a lecturing note, as it usually did when he explained things, which was almost all the time it seemed, Vash noticed. They would have had to have taken in the account that missing, as well as gaining control of my TARDIS remotely. It begs the question of just whom it is you work for, Vash. The doctors seemed genuinely interested. Well, I answer to the Assembly of Rifters, but well reception. The doctor stared at him blankly, waiting. And reception's kind of, you don't know, finished the doctor. The doctor then gave him that look he always did when someone failed to give an answer to a question he thought they should know. Well, I only met their representative once, Vash said, raising his hands up in defeat. Looking away, the young rifter seemed to be pouting. So what? You just teleport in and... By the way, how does that work anyways? The doctor asked. Oh, well, teleop crystals, Vash went to say before the doctor cut him off. No, wait, let me finish, the Time Lord said in a hurry as if he was interrupted. But you asked me a question, Vash tried to say. So you just teleport in, the doctor said, ignoring him. Pick up your next little crystal and you're on your way again, Do you even know where you're going half the time, Vash? Or do you just pop on in with your sword waving trying to solve the next riddle? Vash's mouth fell open in a gasp, a smile creeping onto his face as Perry laughed openly. That sounds a lot like you, Doctor. Not now, Perry, the doctor said, raising his voice, his attention on Vash. I tolerate what you do, Vash, because for all extensive purposes, you're not hurting anyone. But now that I find that time travel's involved, I'll have to put a stop to it. the doctor said, as if that was that. Well, that's not really fair, Vash said, crossing his arms as he did. Not fair? Number not fair, Vash said once again, actually getting a little angry. Look, Doc, we've had this conversation at least 10 times, and it always ends with you telling me you'll have to check up on things and go there yourselves. It's not my fault, Vash said, his anger turning to sarcasm, that you didn't do a very good job at it while you were there, and instead decided to run off with your pink little crystal like a Dalek with his first ray gun. A Dalek with his first ray gun? The doctor simply stared at Vash. Yeah, or I don't know, a girl with her first love letter. Perry simply stood watching, her face full of amusement, switching back from the doctor to Vash as they spoke. Sighing, the doctor strode forward, placing his arms around Vash as he led him forward further into the TARDIS. Look, Vash, the doctor said much friendlier now, why do you get involved when you do? Because there's a rifter causing mayhem, correct? Yes, Vash said slowly, eyeing his friend cautiously as he did. And only when there's a fellow rifter, right? Right, Vash repeated. Well, the Time Lords are the same way, the doctor explained, leading Vash through the doors that led to the kitchen dining room further in. We only ever involve ourselves if someone's meddling with the fabric of time. One wrong word, one wrong movement could change the course of time in its entirety with disastrous results. Wait, Vash said, pulling himself from the doctor's touch. What about you, though? We've been to numerous of places, Doctor. Yeah, you're always telling me to be cautious, but we still go. Ah, but see, I do it responsibly, the older man said, as if the answer was so simple. Look, I agree with you this time, Doctor. I've never been sent anywhere out of my own time, but even still, technically I wasn't. You brought us here, he said, pointing his friend in the chest as he did. So the only one of my travels we should be contesting is this one. Fair enough, the doctor conceded. Striding over to the food machine, he pressed a few buttons, a cup dropped down, and began to fill with a liquid. A chilled green Kepler tea with lemon and ginger for you, my friend, the doctor said, placing the cup into his hands. Thank you, Doctor, Vash said, smiling once again. Now, before we step outside and see just exactly where we are, I'd like to reinstall that crystal and, well, while I'm at it, I'd like to attach this piece of equipment to the TARDIS. Now, Vash, your room's exactly how you left it, just in a different place. Vash took a sip of the tea, smiling. Kepler was his favorite. Doing a little rearranging, huh, Doc? What happened to Nisa and... Seeing the man's face, Vash let the question go. No, never mind. Perry seems nice, though, he said, smiling at his old friend. She's kind, brave, and resourceful, the man said rather proudly, looking to the doors that led back to the console room. They're all brave, the man said, lost almost in his thoughts. My room, Vash said, bringing the Time Lord back to the present. Ah, yes. Through the doors down there. Down the hall, make a left. Go through your next door on the right. Vash was attempting to list the directions on his fingers, as if counting. Go all the way through the library and mind the pool, the doctor said a little roughly, as if it was a common problem. And it will be the next door on the left, Green. You can't miss it. Before Vash could so much as laugh or thank him, the man had disappeared. Shaking his head with a smile, Vash took another sip of the tea and began to recount the directions as he headed further in. Perry was just outside the door as the Time Lord swung it open, flowing into the room in a hurry. Is everything all right? Perry asked, a small touch of worry in her voice. Nothing to worry about, Perry, the doctor said, quite warmly. I was just seeing that our young friend was comfortable, that's all. So is he coming along then? The girl asked, a small smile coming to her face. Why, yes, perpigillium, the Time Lord said, moving a small strand of hair from in front of the young woman's face to behind her shoulder before flicking her in the nose and moving past her. Now, I must install the crystal lattice before anything, the doctor said, all back to business. Stopping mid-stride, he quickly turned to the girl, as if just noticing her for the first time. "Oh, Perry, do get changed," the man said. "You can't go out like that," he muttered, turning around to fumble with his controls. Rolling her eyes with a small pout, Perry stormed out the room. Asterisk. The doctor flipped the control lever, opening the doors of the TARDIS, heading off to take a quick peek before his companions would notice. He stepped out the doors, for the TARDIS seemed to have landed inside a large, rather empty room. Exiting the room, he continued further and made his way down the ramparts that overlooked a rather large city. As he did, a gruff voice called out, "Wait right there! Wait! Whatever do you mean? For whom should I be waiting for?" "Bug off," Dials said before Furl's elbow took him in the side. Licking his lips, the burly guard hoped the man had took no offence. "Why, the procession, of course, my lord sirs. You are a top, aren't you?" The man seemed to be eyeing the doctor's clothes as he asked. Looking around, the doctor took in the rest of the people, well dressed, bustling to and fro down the busy street. "And you must be an important one at that, to be on Her Majesty's ramparts, sir." The doctor seemed to swell, his chest rising in stature, growing bigger. "Why, yes, I am," the man said quite haughtily. "However, if you'll remind me, just whose procession is it we're here to observe?" Dials, who had been bowing and apologizing since his rude outburst, seemed not to hear them. "Why, the Earl's, sirs," Furl said, hacking a rather thick loogie off the wall. "Everyone knows that," the man grumbled. "What are you on about, eh?" The doctor seemed offended, getting as close to the man as he dared, as both men smelled quite rancid. In his usual lecturing voice, he said, "And I would have assumed that everyone would have known of my arrival as well, being a guest of Her Majesty's, yet here I am being forced to question whether her servants here are even capable of—" "Oh no, I'm sorry, my lord," the big man clapping Dials on the back, rather hardly as if it was his comment that had warranted such a statement, began to sweat now too, his large brow furrowing in worry. "You'll find the Majesty's, I mean Her Majesty's servants, more than capable." The man seemed to be almost blubbering now. "Very welcome you are, sir. Very welcome." Dials was repeating next to him, to no one in particular. "Think nothing more of it?" the doctor said quite placidly, placing a hand upon the burly man's shoulder. "A mistake, I'm sure, and without mistakes, how would we learn?" Giving a laugh, which the other two men quickly joined in with, the three men stood smiling at each other. Past quarrels lost. "Now, my good man, mister?" "Furls, sir. Just Furls," the man bellowed shyly. "I'm no mister." Dials, the skinny, awkward man, stammered, giving a rather overbiting, toothy grin. "Well, my good sirs, Dials and Furls," the doctor said quite graciously, "if you would be so kind as to point me in the direction of the stairs, I would be most obliged." "Oh, yes, of course, mister." "Oh, just doctor," the doctor said, once again retaining his lordly manner. "Oh, yes, just over down there. Yes, straight ahead and to the left, Lord Doctor. You can't miss it." "Thank you, gentlemen," the doctor chirped quite briskly as he shuffled along down the direction the man had pointed. As the doctor disappeared, the two men watched him go. Dials turned to Furls. "Hey, Furls, aye?" "Yes," Dials, the big man, slowly hummed. "Furls, aye? Do you think the Lord Doctor's here for the match then too, aye?" "Well, of course he is," the big man said, eyeing his friend, a small look of disapproval on his face. "Bug off, mate. I'm just asking. How do you figure? He don't look more much like a fighter to me is all." "Dials!" Furls said, frowning even more now. "Did you see the man's coat?" Aye, all colours and flashy it was." "Aye, what of it?" Well, of course he can fight then. Any top wearing a coat like that here is asking for trouble. First establishment the Lord Doctor goes, and he'll have a man or two toppling over, mark my words. Aye, right you are there, Furls, right you are. Vash woke to a knock on the door, embarrassed at having fallen asleep. He practically jumped off the bed, calling, "Yes, yes, come in." The door opened slowly. Expecting to see the doctor, he was quite surprised to find Perry standing there, a small sense of wonder on her face. "Why, hello, Perry," he said, still half asleep, trying to stifle a yawn as he slowly stretched upwards. Come in," he added, as her eyes took in the room. He quickly walked over to the desk left of the bed. Facing away from the wall along the back side of the room, one had to walk around it to reach the chair, and on the wall was a stand which held Vash's swords. A gift from a rather pretty empress from one of the Doctor and his previous adventures, the sword rack had been a sort of parley present, meant to help persuade him into convincing the Doctor to stay and marry the rather forceful woman. Despite Vash's many tear-streaming and laughter-filled arguments with the man, he had failed in his endeavour, but had decided to keep the gift anyways. "This is your room?" Perry asked, eyes wide, as she took in the many strange and familiar items Vash had collected and filled the room with over his many often short-term stays with the Doctor. Their meetings were often sporadic and usually never lasted more than a few weeks, a couple months at most. Vash truly relished his time with the man, and once again seeing the spoils of their adventures and all their familiarity brought a warmth to the boy's chest. Perry was looking at the large leather couch to the right of the room, her eyes widening as she saw this 60-inch TV screen. "Is that a television?" she asked, running over to look at the backside of it. Her jaw seemed to drop as she did. "But where's the rest of it?" she marveled. Vash gave a loud laugh, coming over to stare at the flat screen with her, sword now on his hip. "I often forget the time-travelling aspect when it comes to the Doctor's companions," the young man admitted with a smile. "What year is it?" Vash asked the young woman as she turned a smile at him. She was now wearing jean shorts and a white puffy blouse shirt, and was quite pretty to Vash. 1983, the young woman said, tearing herself away to stare at the game console in the glass entertainment center underneath the TV. Vash decided he quite liked Perry right then. He was usually fond of the Doctor's companion, and this young girl seemed both sweet and childish, full of wonder and an inquiring mind, as the Doctor would say. "Well, Perry, it's from your future. All TVs got thinner in the 21st century. What year is it where you're from?" "Hopefully where we are," Vash said, frowning a bit. "It's supposed to be 2022, he said with a sigh. "But knowing the Doctor," they both shared a laugh. At this statement, "Speaking of which, where is the old Doc?" Vash said, yawning once again. Perry, no longer distracted, seemed to jump. "That's right! Zrania," she cried, running over to Vash, almost hitting the couch as she did. "I can't find the Doctor." "Oh no, he didn't go ahead without us, did he?" Vash quickly went to the desk, hitting the light and taking one last look at the many papers and pictures he had accumulated on the desk, hurried over to Perry, brushing past her while urging her to follow. "Come on, Perry," he said, adopting the Doctor's tone, as he often did around the man. "Let's not let the man get too far ahead, The Doctor stood amidst the doorway, speaking with a young man. "I don't care what you call it. A joyberry is a joyberry, and there's no way it's worth 3 plythons." "Plythons," the young man corrected, not quite understanding why this lord was heckling him over the price of a brie fruit. "Sir, I assure you the price has not changed since this morning." Fearing he may upset the man, he looked around and rose a hand. "For you, my liege, I can do it for 2. With a sigh, the Doctor handed back the man his brie fruit. "Alas, my dear fellow, I haven't a plython to spare." Moving away from the stall, the Doctor appraised the rather neat and orderly street he was on, in the midst of commerce it seemed. He eyed a well-dressed man buying a rather big and ugly rug. It was purple and brown, The colour merely faded. "Yes, I agree, Farnsworth," the man said to the servant of the man next to him. Farnsworth was a good 5 inches shorter than him, with a shaved head, a rather astute black serving attire and white bow-tie match. The man seemed to be counselling him on the worth and uses of items being shown. The doctor approached the pair. A Parmesan rug, I see," the doctor remarked, studying the cloth. "Ah, late 57th century, you can tell by the stitchings," he added, as his hands brushed the ends. "Oh, a fellow lord, I see," the well-dressed man said with a smile. "Good day, sir. My name is Albert Popinski, the third." He extended his hand towards the doctor. "Ah, Sir Albert, the pleasure is all mine," the doctor said, shaking the man's hand rather earnestly. "And I am the doctor." "Doctor who?" Sir Albert said with a smile, returning the man's shake. "Ah, just the doctor." The doctor smiled warmly. "Just the doctor, eh? Oh, well, what brings you here to Camelon, Lord Doctor?" "Well, the procession, of course," the doctor answered, eyeing the crowd around them. "Oh, come to see the old boy gallop as well?" The man then seemed to wave at Farnsworth, who proceeded to pay the man at the stall for the rug, placing a handful of coins into his hands. "Well, doctor, I must insist you join us to watch from our place near the front. I say you won't find a better viewpoint elsewhere." "Well, Mr. Popinski, I would be honoured," the doctor said with a grin. "After you, doctor." "Oh, no, Mr. Popinski. I must insist. After you." The Time Lord swept his hand aside. "Oh, well, if you do insist," the man said with a chuckle, taking the lead. "Come now, Farnsworth. Hurry up now." Farnsworth, burdened with the rug, merely replied, "Very good, sir. Very good." Vash and Perry stepped out of the TARDIS into a large and mostly barren room. In the corner were a few boxes, white in nature. Vash clapped the side of the blue box affectionately before closing the doors. The TARDIS did seem a bit out of place, but it always did when visiting anywhere but Earth. There was only one door in the room, and Vash headed off towards it. "Let's go find a doctor before he has all the fun," Vash said cheerfully, smiling at Perry, who in truth seemed a little worried. The door opened to a shadowed section of what appeared to be a stone walkway. Vash looked up and saw that a stone arc connecting to higher in the wall was what was shading them. To the left was another door that he guessed led further into the building, so he decided to go right. The pathway ended and turned left. Turning left, he found 2 men standing overlooking the busy street below them. Vash peered over the wall next to them and whistled. "It's like a mix of future and medieval times." "Logically," he said with a grin, back to Perry, who was looking around nervously. "Hey, and just who are you?" Furls asked, poking the boy in the chest. "Who am I?" Vash asked with a gasp. "Who are you?" he said, poking the man back. "Well, we're guards," Dials said, quite feverishly, his eyes bouncing back from Perry to him. "Guarding what, though?" Vash asked, smiling now. "Why, Her Majesty's ramparts, of course," Furls said, going to grab the young man. Vash did a quick spin, avoiding the man's hand entirely. As he did, the swords on his belt clinked, drawing the big man's attention. "Oh, another fighter for the tourney, eh?" Going with the flow of things as he usually did when adventuring with the doctor, he replied, "I that I am man. I was just escorting the Lady Perry here," he said with a gesture towards the girl, who, having just finally walked up, looked a bit confused. "I had just took the Lady Perry here to the restrooms was all, and afraid we may have gotten lost." "Gotten lost?" the big man bellowed. "You bloody damn well did, mate." "Aye," Vash said, his eyes narrowing and hand going to his blade. "I will not have my Lady Perry here be subjected to such foul words. I've never seen a lady with such," the man seemed lost for words, "such a short dress as such." "Ah," Vashi said, relaxing and clapping the man on the shoulder, almost in the same manner the doctor had. "But of course," raising his hand slightly so that Perry couldn't hear, he said, "she's from Billingsway, man." "Billingsway?" the man repeated, seeming confused. Yes, yes, Billingsway, you know, man. From the south, he almost whispered, while giving the man a conspiratorial smile, like the subject was a much laughed at topic. Oh, Billingsway, of course, the big man said, eyeing Perry now, a look of amusement on his face. Billingsway, of course, Dials said, bowing from the side. Well, off you go then, Furls said, stepping aside. The procession's soon to start. Ah, Vash said hesitantly. Mister? Just Furls, sir. I'm no mister. Oh, well, Furls then. If you could perhaps just point us in the right direction? With a sigh, the big man gestured ahead of him. Just down there to the left. Thank you, Vash said with a smile. Right this way, Lady Perry, he called behind him. As Perry passed, the two guards bowed slightly. She smiled nervously and followed Vash. As the pair proceeded down the path, the two men watched them go. Aye, Furls, aye. What is it now, Dials? You reckon I ain't ever seen no lady dressed like that, eh? Where is Billingsway? Shaking his head slowly, a look of pity in his eyes for his simple-minded friend, the big guard merely said, From the south, Dials. She's obviously from the south. Oh, aye. Yea. Asterisk. That was close, Perry said, having finally caught up to Vash. What? The young man said, smiling. Not at all, Perry. Excuse me, my Lady Perry. Perry rolled her eyes at him. Where do you think the doctor's gone? She asked, peering around. They followed the staircase down that was to the left, passing another pair of guards, who Vash was sure had been given orders not to allow anyone up. That didn't, however, include letting anyone down, for they quickly moved to allow the pair to go unabated. Oh, I'm sure he's around here somewhere, Vash said, looking around as well. Everyone seemed to be moving in the same direction, probably to watch the procession, Vash surmised. Come, Perry, let's fall in with this crowd here and see what's going on. Now I see why the doctor and you get along, Perry said. Ignoring the frown she gave him, he simply replied, Thank you, and pushing through the crowd led them deeper. The people were thinning out both to the left and the right, taking their places on the side of the road that led straight through the city. Perry and Vash moved with a few people off to the right, until they had a nice clear look at both sides of the road. The road was actually a good 10 feet in front of them, but to get any closer was impossible, as guards stood blocking the way. I guess we'll have to watch from here, Vash said to Perry, who was standing now on her tippy toes, trying to get a better look. You'll just have to be patient, Vash said, looking to the left as the young woman strained to see. Wait, she said, grabbing him by the arm. What is it? Look up there, she said, pointing. What? It's the doctor! Vash squinted his eyes, and sure enough, you're right, it is. Who's that he's seated with? She asked. Or, how'd he get such a good spot? Vash asked, a little disappointed. Look, they're even laughing like they're the best of friends. The doctor and Sir Albert were seated across the road on a raised stand, adorned with rather luxurious and grandly carved chairs. The doctor seemed to be explaining something to the man seated next to him when a loud horn sounded, seeming to grab everyone's attention. The Earl of Durnsworth, a loud male voice echoed throughout the clearing. Here to swear fealty to Her Majesty Queen Edna, a chorus of horns seemed to play as a well-dressed man approached, riding a large white horse, both him and the animal draped in blue and white garments. On both the man and horse, a pink rose was fashioned, presumably the crest of Durnsworth. Nobody's heard of this Viger man, Lord Popinski was saying to the doctor as he ate a rather large piece of meat from the bone. We haven't had word in 40 years from Durnsworth, after the great shunning, you know, he continued, biting a rather large piece off. Then all of a sudden, the man said in between bites, he just sends word of his coming. The man was waving around the piece of meat as he spoke. Earl Viger, they say, but Earl to whom, I ask? His piece of meat resting in the air now for dramatic effect. The doctor asked as he watched the Earl slowly make his way down the road, waving to a peasant here or there. The shunning, the man continued, taking another bite, enjoying it quite immensely. Durnsworth, before they exiled themselves, never had any earls or lords before. He continued, almost choking on the last bite, coughing slightly before wiping his mouth. He looked from the doctor back to his meat. "Are you sure you're not hungry, doctor?" he asked. "Quite sure," the doctor replied, studying the earl as he drew nearer now. "Oh, well, very good then," he said, taking another bite. "You were saying then about them not having any lords?" "Ah, yes. Well, they considered themselves men of learning, scholars if you may. Everyone knew them as such, so you can believe it came as quite a surprise that after 40 years of silence, they send an earl to swear loyalty. The earl was practically in front of them now, when out of nowhere, a bright red line seemed to appear going straight into the earl, knocking the man clear off his horse. "My word!" cried Lord Popinski, his eyes widening in both surprise and horror. In less than a moment, the doctor had left his seat and had jumped down amidst the chaos to check on the man. The people along the road started yelling, some leaving, others pushing forward, causing the many guards to have to push back. Vash, amidst the frantic yells and screams of the people, tried to get a hold of Perry. "Perry! Perry!" he yelled. But as the people panicked and chaos consumed, he lost sight of her. "Oh no," he thought to himself, "I've lost Perry." End of scene 1. Although the doctor was first to reach the earl as he fell, he was soon surrounded by kingdom guards, many of which seemed focused on keeping the crowds back. "Give him some space," the doctor ordered, examining the wound still freshly burnt into the earl's chest. "Cauterized on both sides from the heat, it seems," he stated, now turning his attentions to the man's vitals, as there was no help he could give as far as first aid went. While feeling for a pulse at the man's neck, the doctor's lapel was quickly held in the dying earl's fist. Pulling the doctor close to him and observed closely by the guards, the earl whispered into the doctor's ears. The doctor listened, then seemed to nod, at which the earl tightened his grip on the Time Lord, before once again saying something to him, his words coming much slower. The doctor gave a small frown, but clasped the weak man's hand. "I promise to tell he said. "You have my word." Seemingly satisfied with the doctor's promise, Earl Vigar, emissary of Durnsworth, let his eyes close and breathed no more. A minister of the court quickly cleared his way through the circle of guards. "Out of my way, men! Stand clear!" the small, round, pompous man said, upon seeing the doctor. The minister perhaps slowed for a second, taking in the doctor's colourful coat. He perhaps thought to put a name to the obvious lord. The doctor, however, saved him the embarrassment of failing to produce one by standing to regard the man. Is the earl?" Licking his lips, the minister seemed to hesitate on the precipice of saying, "Dead." Giving the man a rather disapproving look, the doctor said, "Dead? Yes, he is." "And whom, may I ask, are you?" the minister asked, while looking upon the dead form of Earl Vigor. Doctor, my good man," Albert Popinski called, having been much slower at the start from his perch above. He was now at the edge of the platform, on which his chair was stationed. "Oh, a doctor, you say?" the minister added, eyeing the man perhaps with a slightly higher regard. "Well, how fortunate for the earl, then." "Not fortunate enough, it seems," the doctor said, eyeing the now sparsely filled street. "Now just who would want to murder the earl?" The doctor asked, looking both the guards and minister over. The doctor here was talking to the man before he died, though. A rather older, hawk-nosed guard said to the minister. Ignoring the doctor's questions, the minister regarded the doctor once more. "And just what did the man say?" he asked, almost rather commandingly, as if his very presence demanded an answer. "And it's all very well I was here, for now I must insist you take me to Her Majesty at once." "Well, surely I can relay the message," the earl went to say. "Nonsense," the doctor said, cutting the man off. "The earl is dead," he said rather flatly. "I gave my word to deliver his message to Her Majesty Queen Edna." The only thing stalling me from doing so was perhaps the chance of ascertaining his reason of death. Has anyone gone to check where the assailants fired from? Red in the face, the minister began to stammer. Well, I'll have you know. No, I'm afraid, minister. What you'd have me do is stand here. His voice raising as he said, stand here and waste more time. Turning to the three of the guards, idle now with no crowd to manage, he quickly set about sending them to find perhaps a clue to the whereabouts of the said shooter. Ask the people closest, he added as the man ran off. Mr. Popinski, only having just managed to turn himself around on the ledge and slowly lower himself to the ground, stood red in the face, sweating and out of breath from his small excursion from the ledge to ground. Very good, doctor, he said, panting a bit. I'll vouch for you, man. The Queen will want to hear of this, I'm sure. My dear minister, the doctor said, once more regaining a civil tone, if you would please be so kind as to arrange an escort to Her Majesty. Yes, man, bring us along, Mr. Popinski added. With perhaps the combined efforts of both lords, the minister wove another set of guards over, and giving specific instructions to direct the proceedings around them, the doctor, Lord Popinski, and the Queen's minister, along with the remaining rather large group of guards, made their way into the castle to seek audience with the Queen. Her Majesty's court was adorned in finery. Red cloth lined the walls and floors, contrasting with the pink marble on which it sat. The room had a warmish glow about it. Flowers of white and blue filled the vases that sat at intervals of 10 to 15 feet. Paintings of past monarchs filled the great room. Above the crystal chandelier that hung from the ceiling was a landscape of art. Bright, warm skies with fields seen at dusk, full of angels and creatures, looked down upon the doctor as he slowly walked towards the golden throne at which Queen Edna, protector of the land, sat awaiting her guests with a regal smile. The Queen, a rather healthy but large woman, sat glowing, for her visage, despite her weight, was still that of beauty and warmth. She also had a kind face, and was widely cherished by both her servants and her kingdom. As Lord Popinski and the doctor drew closer, the minister sped forward, speaking perhaps an introduction of the two men before her, with a gentle wave towards the doctor. He stepped aside. Our dear Albert, the Queen exclaimed, a smile forming on her face. We have missed you dearly, cousin. Lord Popinski gave a bashful smile before a slight bow. Edna, it's always a pleasure to see your grace. Looking to the doctor, the Queen took on a more inquisitive, although still friendly look. And you must be the doctor. Your Majesty, the doctor cooed, giving her one of his best bows. The pleasure, I assure you, is mine. However, I do wish the circumstances of our meeting— Nonsense, nonsense, doctor. A man of learning, the Queen said, hushing the doctor, her eyes taking on a sparkle of excitement. It's been 40 years since a man of learning has graced these halls, so you must excuse us, the Queen added hurriedly, for we were not expecting you for another 2 weeks. Clapping her hands together twice, the Queen summoned over 2 servants who had been waiting idly against the wall. Ready a room for our dear guests, would you? Right away, Your Majesty. There, off they go. Expecting me? The doctor asked. But of course, dear doctor. The Earl's letter mentioned only of your arrival in weeks to come, but it is of no consequence, for everyone in the kingdom knows that a man of Durnsworth is always early and never late. Sniffing proudly, the Queen eyed her own court briefly. I dare say we here at Remingway would do well to adopt some of your customs. Well, I won't deny being a man of science, the doctor said, beaming at the court now. And why should you? Answered Queen Edna, now slightly fanning herself with a knowingly smile. It's precisely at times like these that the kingdom rejoices in the return of our dearly neighbour province. Turning to her minister, she quickly ordered that the doctor be given free rein of the courts and kingdom. Help him in every regard, I say. It is my utmost wish to clear the air of any lingering doubts. We must bring the culprit to justice, and with a doctor to help, I say. she said, once again eyeing the doctor, a look of curious affection in her eye. For now, dear doctor, if you'll be so kind, the courts still have matters to attend. Fear not, though, for we shall talk again over dinner. Queen Edna, I must congratulate you in your wisdom, for I rejoice to say that it would appear that Remingway is under a very just and noble ruler. However, the Earl did ask me to relay a message. Flattered perhaps by his earlier statement, the Queen looked eager and sat waiting. Eyeing the room perhaps a little nervously, the doctor said, "The Duke of Millview is rallying troops at the border. I dare say Durnsworth foretells of a civil war." Amidst the gaps amongst the court, the doctor quite quickly laid descriptions of his friends to the guards, asking them that they be found and brought to the keep immediately. "Fellow scholars, are they?" asked the Queen, whose attention was now being diverted on what the doctor could only assume was her master of arms. "Of a sort," the doctor answered, once again bowing to Her Majesty. "Well, they shall be found at once, and of course provided with the highest standards of regard. If you'll excuse us now, Doctor. But of course, Your Majesty. Show the good doctor to his quarters, would you?" "But at once," answered a servant, who, running over to the doctor, quickly procured the man's arm and gently began leading him away. Pleased with himself and the way things were going, the doctor allowed him, meanwhile. "Perry? Have you seen my friend Perry?" Vash asked, turning around a woman in passing. The woman eyed he man warily at first, but then listened to Vash's brief description, and with a frown said that she had not. "Great! A dead emissary, missing companions. Why does every trip end up being the same?" Vash said, moving past a loud, rather boisterous building, from the noises within and the quality of state of the men. Exiting the place, Vash assumed this to be a tavern. If you like this, please feel free to leave a comment and your thoughts. The author has also made the first chapter of his book available, The Art of Rifting. If enough people love this as he does, I'm sure he'll finish both the Doctor's and Vash's one of many adventures.